we have now Dr. Patrice Twomey. She's Director of the Cooperative Education and Careers Division at UL. Patrice.
So yeah, my name is Patrice Twomey and I'm Director of Cooperative Education and Careers here at the University of Limerick. So it's a division that is concerned for students' employability and also in developing their future graduate capital, their sense of their future professional selves, as it were. So I should say that industry partnership at UL has been in our DNA since our establishment. You know, at the time, our education philosophy was very firmly focused on relevance to industry. And at the time, that also was quite controversial, but we were unapologetic about it. So for the Cooperative Education and Careers Service, the idea of partnership with industry is not something fuzzy. It's something very serious. It's something very concrete. And it is fundamental to the way our division does our business. Sorry, there, I should have moved on there. Sorry, there. We often say you meet no one at home. And by that, we mean that we prioritize a very high touch, face-to-face model of engagement with industry. We have more than 1,000 visits every year, employer visits, so meaning outbound visits by us to employer sites, or indeed inbound visits by employers to the campus. Like this morning, in fact, we have coming in from Seattle to interview students for Co-op in 2024. So just a very quick look at Co-op for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. I know Declan had mentioned his 2 co-ops earlier. It is probably the most tangible expression of large-scale industry engagement within UL. So under Co-op, students undertake an 8-month immersive placement that is a formal, academically accredited and integral and compulsory element of their undergraduate programs. It's a really inclusive program. I would say it's one of its defining features. So students are placed regardless of their discipline, whether they come back from an arts, humanities, social science, engineering, science, business, IT backgrounds. They're all eligible for placement. And that's also regardless of the vocational orientation of the degree, student skills profile, or even the student's academic standing. So it's massively inclusive. I should say that 1/3 of our co-op employers are SMEs, just over 1/3. So a very, very vital part of our employer mix. And because it's so inclusive, it's a really large-scale program. So it's one of the largest work placement programs in Europe. So we have this year we'll have 2,400 students who are eligible for placement across more than 50 degrees. It's very, very large. And that can be one of our challenges. So because it's so inclusive in terms of discipline, we also have a very, very strong sectoral reach. And our geographic coverage is something that we're very proud of. So every year we have students who pack their bags and undertake their co-op globally across a network of 25 countries and in all 5 continents. So, but it's not Pollyanna. So we have once we were the only university in town that offered work placement program. So it distinguished us very much, and it also offered us a great position and advantage in that undergraduate placement space. Now, there's no higher education institution in Ireland that doesn't offer a work placement program of some kind. So it is, I don't think there's any, I don't know what Declan was calling it, was it a competition, was it? There's no competition in the undergraduate placement market. It really is very congested and very contested. And we occupy a leadership position in the area of work integrated learning nationally, and I would say as well globally that we would be considered a very big player. But of course, that leadership position for any organization is the most difficult one to maintain. We're also alive to the differences, of course, between industry and higher education institutions. So, and of course, there are differences, but just in terms of drumbeats, in terms of timeframes, in terms of missions, outputs, expectations. But look, hence the value of engagement and the reason we're here today. So who are you and who are your people? These are actually the immortal words of my grandmother-in-law when she first met me. And I kind of think that, yeah, she really did say that. But I think, what does it say? It kind of says, I know nothing of you, account for yourself. What's so special about you? And I think the questions kind of capture some of the challenges faced by SMEs when it comes to graduate attraction and recruitment. I think it speaks to the sometimes very modest visibility of some SMEs and that sense of very good SMEs just sitting just below the radar of final year students. That, of course, means that very good candidates may not be aware of great opportunities within interesting SME organizations. So some of the kind of the challenges or the points of pain, as it were, that SMEs have raised with us down through the years are that sense of being overshadowed by larger organizations when it comes to recruitment and selection. And I think it is fair to say that larger organizations can at times sort of dominate the narrative, the branding, and even the airwaves when it comes to graduate attraction and recruitment. And then, of course, there's that issue of size and leanness, which means that many SMEs, operate under the constraints of budgetary and maybe time issues. And graduate recruitment can be very time intensive and expensive at times as well. And this was touched on earlier by maybe it was Giles, who said that SMEs also have that problem of reaching into universities. So they're not sure who to contact. They feel that their scale is too small to be of relevance or of interest, and that would be a mistake to think that. And maybe a feeling that universities may not understand their specific needs. On the other hand, we have often come across SMEs who have secured a very good graduate after a very long time looking for them. And the response from the graduate is to say that they spent ages looking for an organization like theirs. So we know the matches can be made, but I guess we just need to find better ways of achieving those matches. So I would say this course, I would, that cooperative education, our work placement is a fantastic mechanism for building your brand, growing your visibility with current students and with future graduates. And really, take it from me, like there is nothing like the zeal of the co-op student convert. They will speak to their peers and they will speak very compellingly about your organization to their peers. And we know, of course, that there is a relationship between cooperative education here in UL and graduate recruitment. And we have this is evidence. So just this week, we published the Early Career and Graduate Employer Report. It's a national survey based on the responses of 340 graduate employers. And we know that 40% of graduate employers hired their placement student after graduation. That is a massive conversion rate. And I guess it speaks to A, the crossover between the work placement and graduate recruitment, but B, that kind of hidden job market that we all hear about. Oh, sorry there. I think I went too far there. Sorry. But co-op isn't the only conduit to bring your brand closer to graduates and students. Our faculties regularly collaborate with SMEs on the delivery of modules. So as part of their modules, but obviously under the expert guidance of our faculty members, our undergraduates and postgraduate students work with SME clients on things like feasibility studies, business plans, sales and marketing plans, business innovation, and other more specific consultancy projects. And in our career service, and maybe Gavin will speak to this in a while, we've just launched an employer in residence program. And we also have a series of fireside chats with employers. Now, what they are not are corporate presentations. They're not your slide deck. This is about sitting down in a kind of a cozier environment with final year students. These are also in-person events, and we've run them over the last few weeks, and it is amazing the turnout by students. All that people say about disengagement, students will come to a fireside chat. So engaging with universities, I hope, may not be as complex as it might and difficult as it might seem. But I would say as well, remember, that the trend is the SME employer's friend. So we know from students that they perceive or that SMEs can give a more diverse experience, that there are more opportunities to make a difference, but sometimes there's more value congruence between them and SMEs, that they like the opportunity of working in smaller teams, that they like the idea that they're closer to the leadership. And there are more opportunities, they feel, that's their perception, for social interaction. And our data support that. So we've just run a survey of more than 800 final year students, and the students, 45% of those students indicated a preference for working with an SME. That compares to 42% of students who were interested in working in a larger firm, and the others are the not-for-profit or public sector. Just want to mention salary just very briefly, because it comes up a lot, that's salary disparity. And we feel that it may not be the significant barrier that we had thought. So from that same survey, when we asked students about other benefits, they said quite a lot of store by small things like leave cards or sports membership, flexi time, further study leaves, even the cycle to work featured strongly, and company product discounts. So just to be aware of that. Anyway, finally, I mentioned the Early Careers Employer Survey, and 45% of those more than 340 responses came from the SME sector. That is the highest we have ever had. For us, of course, it means that the data are far more representative, but for you, it means that your insights and your feedback, your understandings have informed the findings. So it's just fantastic to see that SME voice cutting through. It is full of interesting information on stuff like graduate trends, behaviours, recruitment channels. And the good news is that it is available here today. So just want to give you the QR code there, if anyone would like to take a pic of it. So thanks very much to all of you. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks very much, Patrice. We're now going to hear from Caroline Pierce. She's Business Development Manager in the UCD Careers Network. Caroline.
Thank you, Jonathan. Morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here in the room, and I think to have many of you joining us online as well. Thanks to the IUA and to Enterprise Ireland for coordinating this event, and UL for hosting us in this beautiful room here. I am delighted to be here on behalf of UCD Careers Network, where, as Jonathan mentioned, I'm the Business Development Manager. And today I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the work we do in careers and how SMEs can engage with us. So very similar, I'm going to echo a lot of what Patrice has already said. I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet, which is always great. So in terms of who we are, the Careers Network in UCD has grown hugely over the last number of years, really to meet the demands of our ever-growing student population. So we now have over 33,000 students, and I think it's closer to 35,000, and that's likely to increase to about 50,000 over the coming years. So we have about 30 full-time staff in the Careers Network. At our core, we're very much a team of careers consultants who work closely with the students, engage with students one-to-one, and then my own role in terms of reaching out to employers, as well as all our events and operations teams. We're across 2 campuses. So we have our main Belfield campus and our Smurfit Graduate Business School. And then probably an important point for everyone here today is our dedicated research careers team. So we have a team of 3 consultants who work closely with our graduate students, so PhDs, postdocs, early research assistants, and they work within a dedicated framework on research careers. Our consultants work to ultimately prepare our students for working life through a whole variety of tools. And something that we've developed in recent years is we have some analysts in our team who capture the data, very much like Patrice mentioned, to track students' levels of career readiness at the different stages in their academic life. So we can see how somebody might go from being very unclear in their early stages, first year on campus, to engaging with us in the careers team, doing some of our practical workshops and making appointments with us, and ultimately building a plan for their career. And that means we can reach students where they need us and have the greatest impact in our work. And then finally, we work closely with our businesses, our employers, to have a whole range of events, both on campus and digitally. And we try to build awareness of your businesses, give you visibility, opportunities amongst our students. So my role as business development manager is very much to engage with employers. I'm only 6 months in the job, so still quite new. My own personal background is working in public sector. Funnily enough, I actually started out on the graduate program in Enterprise Ireland, where I worked overseas for 2 or 3 years, and then ended up working in different public organisations, but also with Irish SMEs. And most recently, I worked with the Department of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat. So what we've spoken about in terms of selling Irish education abroad, working with international students to come to Ireland, and then looking for work opportunities for them here. My main responsibility is around engaging with companies, but rather than just focusing on maybe maintaining existing relationships, it's to look at gaps in some of our connections. So for example, if UCD has new academic programs such as our BSc in sustainability, where are those graduates going to want to work? Where do we need to create connections in our careers team so that we can highlight those opportunities for our graduates? And we have academic programs coming online all the time. So it's about looking at what students want, what industry trends are, and really building that dialogue so that I can tell our consultants when they meet students what's happening in different industries, where there might be opportunities, and really we make that connection. We have a whole range of various channels for employers to engage with our students. Most of these are probably quite well known at this stage. We have our annual careers fairs in UCD on campus. They're now very popular again after the brief hiatus during the pandemic. But we also have very easy kind of digital options as well. We have our careers portal where any employer can create a free account, advertise their vacancies, and they reach students directly. We work with a range of companies for digital campaigns as well, with no cost involved, where we can reach our ready-made audience on Instagram and LinkedIn and communicate your opportunities. And then we also allow work closely with companies to help them come on campus to meet students in the day-to-day, have those one-to-one conversations, or deliver a workshop where there's a skills outcome either. So you might think, okay, that's great if you have all the resources in terms of budgets and HR teams who can design things well in advance and get that out in 6-12 months before you have your vacancies. And we know there are those challenges for SMEs after we've heard them this morning already. So in UCD, we've decided to create a range of themed, smaller, informal events, particularly aimed at the SME market. We know that this landscape is very different, and some of the channels I mentioned might not suit you. Last year, we had our first SME dedicated event, and we focused on themes of sustainable leadership, digitization, and developing your talent pool. And this year, we focused on early research careers. So this goes back to my earlier point of research assistants, PhDs, postdocs, where we invited companies with vacancies in those areas to come into a room and to meet with those students and researchers. And we're hoping that these will become annual themed events, which will allow more for that kind of informal engagement. We're also really keen to work with existing programs. So I know there are representatives here from Enterprise Ireland and all the regional skills development areas. And in the past, we've also worked with smaller businesses who wanted to develop their own graduate programs, but maybe didn't know how to begin or where to start. And we've worked in that kind of advisory capacity as well, helping small companies to develop, to create those programs that can be so attractive for graduates. So if there's one thing I'd like you to take away today, it's really that we want to connect with small businesses. We know that the majority of our graduates, in the first few years after graduating, they will work with an SME. That's just the nature of Irish industry. And so we're keen to keep the conversation going. We do know that one size doesn't fit all, that every company has unique challenges. So please do connect with us. In my role, I'm very happy to be that first port of call and to plug you into the right area and to sit down and understand what your needs are so that we can help you figure out the best way to engage with students. So I'm sharing my contact details here. We have a lot of online supports on our website as well. And I'm very happy to take any questions afterwards or to speak with you during the networking session later on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caroline. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into this now. So, Caroline, if you join us, as I announce the rest of our panel, they are Gavin, Connell, he's Head of Careers at the University of Limerick, Niamh McLoughlin, who's a former intern now working for Scale Ireland, and Joe Leddin, who is from the Regional Skills Forum Midwest. Gavin, we want to start off with you, if that's all right. How can companies get their timings right in working with universities? When should they engage?
Thanks, Jonathan. Welcome, everybody. So it depends on the kind of roles that they're looking to advertise, I suppose, is the first part of it. So as an example, next week we'll have our careers fair, which is it's the largest careers fair we would run here on campus. But we then also have fairs in the spring, which are more kind of discipline specific, and then in just before the students finish for the summer, we'll have a summer fair as well, where we have seen.
Are they the main touch points?
They're main events, we'd call it, but they're, like Patrice had mentioned earlier on, we have employers and residence programs, right, okay, which are all opportunities to engage with students. I suppose we have a dedicated vacancy system. It's free, right, okay, so why wouldn't you put your job there? It's the first port of call for every student. That's where they go first. So I suppose if you know what you anticipate in relation to your recruitment, they are kind of just a given from that perspective.
Right.
I think if it's kind of an immediate thing that, you know, somebody's leaving, you have to replace them kind of fast, that is definitely a reach out to the career service more than just an email, because they're kind of opportunities for us to target those students for you, right? Okay? So we don't really want to be targeting students with every company because eventually it'll just turn off. But when we see kind of very specific needs and requirements, we can reach out, and that's cost free as well, right? Okay, from that perspective.
We were talking about salaries there briefly. I mean, how important is it for SMEs to know what's being offered to these graduates?
I think it's if you don't know the market and you're thinking this is what we're going to pay, next thing you know, you're kind of surprised that nobody's applying, okay, because you're just not reading the market from that perspective. But to Patrice's point earlier on, like the survey that we had done both with the employers gives a lot of detail around average salaries at the undergrad to postgrad. Equally, it kind of ranks benefits as well, right? Because students are very kind of cognizant of all of that now. It's not just I need to pay my rent. They're saying actually there's a value to healthcare, there's a value to a gym membership, and so we also did that survey just very recently last week with the students around that question, and that came up very high, right? Okay, that they're very aware of it. Now, a lot of that is education that we have been doing with students to say it's not just a dollar value here, right? Okay, that we're talking about. It is
that information you share with SMEs?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Patrice had shared the link above earlier on, but you can come onto our website. It's free access. We share it with all the universities as well.
Yeah. So they have a good idea of what is driving these graduates in particular in terms of what
so it goes down into sector, it goes into discipline, it goes to location as well. So you can really dig kind of deep on that information.
What practical ways do UL Careers work with employers to get their branding and approach right? You know, because it's important to get that first impression correct, to be able to start that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So cooperative education is key to that conversation. I would say it's the number one thing we would say, because we can be talking to students about different employers and different sectors, but it'll be the student has returned from a placement that will just say, "What was your placement like?" It's great. It'll be one word answer that says everything, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's a bit like open days here. You'll hear students coming in. They say, "What's this place like?" Grand. That's the seal of a deal, as it were.
Right. Okay.
So that's probably key. But that's not for everybody, because that's a longer commitment, right? Of 8 months of a placement. But there are many different ways you can touch into those employer and residence, those just being on campus and having a presence, because sometimes being at a fair can feel like it's, I'm competing against a lot here.
Overwhelming as well,
yes.
sometimes with
So
students.
that's why we would have the smaller fairs then as well. There's only about 30 exhibitors, so it doesn't feel as forced and as congested. The employer and residence, and actually just I kind of get the sense from myself is if you're just reaching out and saying, "I have a job," students they're not looking at that. They need to have small bit more context. And I suppose one of the areas that we would help employers with, definitely the smaller SMEs, is around job specs. What's going to work here? Right. Okay. So what is that message that you want?
Brochures and that sort of thing.
Yeah, brochures, but just a job spec. I mean, it's not an extraordinary number, but there are some employers just saying, "I'm looking for a business student." Business student is, there's too many majors in that space, right? Okay, what does a business student mean?
I need a scientist.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So there's all of those things. I think being very aware of the salary levels. Not to say that you have to say what the salary is, but when you say competitive, be sure you know what competitive means, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because you make it true, and we have seen this, and it definitely has been a response come back from the employer network, that students who have gone through that process of the whole recruitment cycle and then may turn down an offer. And it is because possibly salary. It's not because they weren't in love with the company, they weren't aware of the job. It was actually when the offer was made, they were just saying that's a low ball on the market. So it is a big thing, yeah.
You're echoing that, Caroline.
Yeah, I'm just going to come in there and say absolutely. I think clarity is really, really important. So even if you're just giving a salary bracket, but it can be, students might know what questions are okay to ask at that stage in their job search. So to give some kind of clarity, and we can work with you on that if it's around a salary bracket. And then I think to echo what Gavin is saying, there's so much more that is attractive to students. What we hear a lot of is kind of the social impact, the sense of purpose, doing good for the community. So all of those are really important hooks and really attractive to students looking for graduate jobs today. And I think that's really where SMEs can have a great impact, because very often they can be closer plugged into communities, to networks, than some large multinationals and corporates.
Yeah. Niamh,
just one thing to that. Just something, this became quite apparent last year, actually. Something that was very reputationally damaging from a brand perspective was not coming back to the student during that recruitment cycle. It kind of during the stages, because there's a lot of competition out there. Okay, so students don't hear anything, they move on. But equally, if they've been through one round or 2 rounds of interviews and don't hear they've been successful, students will say, "I'm fine with it. Just let me know that."
Yeah.
But not hearing anything at all is just reputationally, because they'll say it. That company never came back to me, and you'll take a long time to come back from that, is what I would say.
Interesting, yeah. And when there's so much opportunity out there, you're almost looking for reasons to exclude people sometimes.
Yeah.
Niamh, tell me a little bit about your journey. You're now working for Scale Ireland. How did you end up there?
So I actually began at Scale Ireland when I was here at UL as a student. I've been working for Scale for about 3 years. And just if you don't know what Scale Ireland is, we are a not-for-profit whose mission is to essentially promote entrepreneurship in Ireland and make Ireland a great space for innovation, particularly in the area of tech startups. So we're a relatively new organization. We began in 2019, so pre-pandemic, and we have been growing since. I actually started when I was doing the cooperative program here in UL, which I absolutely loved. and I actually was able to do it with 2. So one of the benefits was the flexibility of the course itself. And I began doing it 10 hours a week. And after a year, I was hired as research executive. So I work kind of with the student group. So I'm the chair of the student group that we have, and also the secretariat of the Scale Ireland Sustainability Group.
And so, why did you want to continue working with them, and why did they want to keep you on?
So one of the aspects that I really enjoyed about working with Scale Ireland was exactly the direct access that I had to senior management. And the CEO of Scale Ireland is Martina Fitzgerald, and she has acted as a fantastic mentor for me. Also, I absolutely loved the impact that we have. So I like meeting the different startups. I like to know what they're doing. We have an amazing set of members. So, for example, we have everything from green tech to med tech to fintech. And it is that social impact that you were speaking about earlier.
Okay, great. And so, in terms of SMEs, what advice would you give them in terms of attracting graduates and getting them involved in engaging?
So once again, I really think it is the visibility, as Patrice said earlier. So, for example, I think that perhaps if a little bit more communication about the benefits is out there, so the possibility of the retention of the position. So I graduated 2 weeks ago, actually, and because of that, before graduating, I had almost 2.5 years of experience. Also, the variety in roles and the overlap. So, I did everything from marketing to admin work, and now the student group and sustainability. So, that was another thing that could definitely be marketed. And also, I think it's a really good opportunity because perhaps when you begin, you don't exactly know what it is that you want to do. So, by having this variety of roles, you know, okay, perhaps I enjoy marketing a little bit more than I prefer the administration, or you prefer external relations, for example, and it gives you a fantastic opportunity to do this.
And how did you find navigating all the opportunities that were in front of you at the time? Because as Gavin said, you know, these student fairs, there's lots of things going on, lots of people giving you brochures and telling you about opportunities nonstop. How did you find navigating that?
I found navigating it really well, actually, because I think UL does a fantastic job at the cooperative education. So you have 3
Pay her
options.
later for
Yeah.
that.
Well, that was the reason I chose UL, actually. So I knew about the program, and that's completely the reason that I chose UL. I knew that I would have an internship and also in my course, personally in Erasmus, before I graduated, which was a huge selling point for me.
Yeah.
But I found navigating it quite easy. So you have 3 options with the program. You can find your own placement. You can also do it abroad, and UL can sort that out for you. And you can also do it as well in Ireland, and UL also organizes that for you. I chose to find it myself, although I saw the options that were there, and I thought they were brilliant. But I kind of knew what it was that I wanted to do, and I knew the organization that I wanted to get into. So I was actually working for 2 SMEs. Upscale Ireland's not an SME, we're an organization, but it is a small organization. And when I joined in 2020, it was smaller than it is now today.
And just, you know, does your experience from just recently graduating marry what we've been hearing in terms of students wanting to have a more personal experience than entering perhaps a very large multinational corporation and being, you know, on a particular path within that organization?
I think so. I mean, because of it, I was able to grow closer relationships with my colleagues. And from there, I learned a lot. So, for example, I was in marketing for a little bit in social media, and I learned from the other employees there. Obviously, with Martina, I learned a lot about, for example, writing and even basic things like administration and whatnot. I really do think it is a very positive experience. And it's interesting because it actually fed back in to certain skills that I learned. Sorry, pardon me. Certain skills that I learned working fed back into my education. So, for example, in my essay writing skills, it helped significantly. So, I do think it marries it.
Tell me a little bit about your work, Joe, because you have a broader remit at the Regional Skills Forum Midwest. What do you do there?
So, first of all, thanks to the IUA for inviting me to represent the team of regional skills managers here. The first thing I would actually say is to any business in the room or online, if you don't know who your regional skills manager is, go seek them out. I have 8 colleagues around the country, 1 in each region, and we report back into the Department of Further and Higher Ed, or the FERRIS. So essentially what we do is we go out and we talk to companies, particularly SMEs, and I'm always cognizant, even from a Midwest point of view, we have about 30,000 enterprises in the region. Over 98% of them are SMEs. So while it's great to have the FDI in the region and in the country, 98% of companies are SMEs. So in that context, we have a very strong educational offering, to be fair, in Ireland, both at further ed and higher ed. But if you're an SME, you're probably trying to juggle multiple tasks and roles within the organisation. You're probably certainly combining HR and L&D, which the bigger multinational can separate out. So trying to navigate the ecosystem, access, Declan reference to the area, who do you talk to if you want to reach out to UL or an Institute of Technology or an education and training board or whatever. So our role, our primary role as regional skills managers is we meet the client, we meet the company, we help them identify their training need. And then I suppose, we're impartial, so which is, I think, a real value add. We can then plug them in or signpost them to the right or the most appropriate training provider, whether it's a university, whether it's an Institute of Technology or a technological university, as they're called now, whether it's an education and training board, whether it's our colleagues in SkillNet. So rather than the client or the company owner trying to navigate multiple organizations, multiple websites, looking for a course, looking for a program, who do I talk to? Is there a grant? Is there funding? We say, reach out to your regional skills manager. We work on behalf of the FERRIS. It's obviously a free service. We're like, as I say to the small micro SME, we're like an extension of your L&D team to just help you cut through the maze. And then, because the good news is there's lots of supports there in terms of courses, in terms of programs, in terms of funding. There's lots of supports there. But where do you start? We say to clients, start with your regional skills manager.
And how do you connect them then, enterprise universities? How does that work?
So we're like in the Midwest, we're very fortunate. We have a real strong value proposition, which I call collaboration. So we've all sorts of different industry networks across the different sectors. We've the biggest manufacturing network in the country, Explore Engineering, chaired actually by Anne Ledwood, who heads up the graduate and professional studies team here in UL. We've a tech network, Digital Midwest. We've networks across all sectors. And the great thing about the networks, Jonathan, is that, okay, you're building relationships amongst the companies. People park the competitive spirit at the door. So, whether we're both in manufacturing, but site leads for different companies, it's all about building that pool of talent, but more importantly, responding to emerging or new skills needs. Right. And that's the other part of our role. So the bread and butter might be dealing with the client and signposting them to UL or to US or an E2B for a particular course or program and linking them in with the right contact. The other part of the role is creating these industry networks, whether it's retail, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's IT, create the relationship within the networks, because the education and training partners, both further and higher ed, they're part of those networks. So we can respond to a new skills need or a new training need. Yeah. And government, in terms of funding, there's never been as much money there for training and support. So every year there's funding calls. It could be to do with Springboard or HCI or the Human Capital Initiative or the whole new world of apprenticeships. Yeah. So by having these networks, and I can obviously only speak for the Midwest, we've such strong collaboration between industry across every sector and the education and training providers. When a new skill or an emerging skill is identified, I can very quickly bring that network together in collaboration with the education and training providers to respond to a new course or a new program.
That's a totally different world from when I graduated. I don't know, it was reasonably long ago, but it's amazing to see all of this cohesion and all of these organizations working together.
But it's leadership.
Great time to be a graduate.
But it's leadership. And I say to colleagues, some of them are in this room, if we didn't have the leadership within the organizations, whether they're SMEs or multinationals, they get the bigger picture. They get the advantage of collaboratively working together. Yeah. Because if we increase the pool, whether it's in engineering or whether it's in ICT or whether it's in logistics or hospitality or retail or any of the sectors, if you increase that pool of talent, then everyone in that sector is going to win.
Going to go to questions from the floor after one quick question for you, Joe, in terms of the EI Spotlight and Skills Initiative. I'm not familiar with this. How do you get
So that's a classic example of collaboration whereby you have Enterprise Ireland working with the FERRIS, whereby we particularly target SMEs. We help the SME put a training plan or a skills plan in place. Very often, and I'm again cognizant, we're heading towards full employment if we're not there already. Sometimes companies don't realize the skills they have within the organization. So by doing an internal skills audit or a training needs analysis internally, if you're a senior manager within the company, you now have an appreciation of the skill set within the organization. So a lot of companies or HR and L&D people will say to me, we have difficult to fill positions. But suddenly, if they realize that Joe or Jonathan or Caroline within the organization has an actual skill set that the company didn't realize, they might be able to pivot them into a different role.
Yeah.
So it's about helping the company put a training needs analysis together, identify the skills within the organization. And by doing that, you then identify the gaps. So if the company is on a growth trajectory and we're introducing new automation or a new piece of equipment or technology, but we don't have the employees with the necessary skills, that gap then can be plugged. So that's a fully funded program, and it's run in collaboration with the Irish Management Institute, IMI, funded by Enterprise Ireland. The regional skills managers come in at the start to give an overview. The client then works intensively, to be fair, with IMI, and then at the end of the process, when they have that roadmap, they've identified the skills needs they need and the gaps that are there. The regional skills manager comes back in and says, right, you need to be talking to UL or UCD or TUD or whoever to address that skills need.
I'm laughing because one of my first jobs was at a large multinational company in Dublin, and everyone in that role was in the wrong role. Everybody had the wrong skill set and knew that the other person would have been way better than the job. Yeah. Probably could have benefited from that. So questions from the floor or questions from online, please send them in to us. Caroline, in terms of the work that you do, internships versus placements, how do you approach them? Are they approached differently?
Yeah, I suppose one of the challenges, and I'm sure many of you here will be aware of it, the scale of UCD is a challenge in itself.
Yep.
So we do offer, and most of our academic programs do offer internships. Usually they can be anything between 6 to 12 months, and they're managed by the various schools and colleges themselves as part of the academic program. However, our careers team has oversight of that whole variety and range. So we do bring all our internship kind of placement officers together and make sure that they're working closely with us, because as we've heard today, there is that huge conversion rate from internships to graduate jobs.
Yeah.
And really, we talked about the timing maybe of SMEs engaging with careers networks and universities, and it's never too early is what I'll say, but also it's never too late. Like, maybe don't think just because you're not in a particular kind of timeline for recruiting graduates that you've missed the boat on something.
Yeah. In terms of the enthusiasm for its graduates, I presume it's overrepresentative by multinational corporations. In most of those placements presumably are these large companies that have the resources and money. Yeah,
that's true. We do see a lot of that, but I think, as we've heard today, the word of mouth amongst students themselves is so compelling. So when we do have a student in an SME, in any kind of company, and they come back and say to their own class and their peers about their great experience, that speaks volumes as well.
We have a question there. Brilliant.
Just a question more to the IUA with regards to, have they looked at allocating skills to college courses? Because when you look at, I suppose, college degrees, master's programs, even micro-credentials going forward, it's very often hard for an employer to understand what skills does the actual student, graduate have, and how can you utilize those day one. So we're all talking about skills and talent, but are we looking at allocating skills or skill certificates to actually college courses to simplify it down and make it easier for employers to understand what they're getting from a new employee/student?
I know we don't have anyone from IUA here, but do someone respond to that? Yeah.
It's not so much an IUA thing, but that would remind me of learning outcomes for students. Caroline, you might, and Gavin, you might know more about that. And UCC graduate attributes, where there's clearly defined outcomes and skill levels that students need to meet, and they're actually marked down on their parchment afterwards. So there's clearly defined graduate outcomes for each course, where they do have to hit a required number of skills. So I think there is a way around it. So if anybody in the audience here knows more, better, if you just hook up in the networking session afterwards.
Yeah, jump in, Caroline. there.
I can just to speak to that, as Leah and the IOA mentioned, there are clear kind of graduate outcomes. So if there are technical requirements, they will usually be listed under kind of, you know, the technical degrees. I'm thinking about like engineering, science, computer science. But similarly, our Careers Network works with providing embedded modules, teaching students a lot more of those interpersonal skills, communication skills, presentation, the kind of readiness for the working world. And they do receive certificates and awards that they will list on their CVs, citing those outcomes. So it's very much kind of trying to work together, the academic and the co-curricular element, to make sure that those skills are listed and are clear for you guys as employers.
Okay, super. And the other question then is, last year on Indeed.ie, we 22,000 open roles. At the start of this year, we 66,000 open roles on Indeed.ie. As of last week, we 53,000 open roles on Indeed.ie. There's a massive problem with regards to, I suppose, getting the right talent. And we have a massive pool of graduates. So like, how can we simplify that process so that we can hire more graduates as quickly as possible to understand, and again, it feeds into the skills part.
Gavin, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that at the very start. So every university has their own careers management system where all the vacancies can be advertised directly to students. I don't use Indeed, to be honest. It collects a lot of jobs into one place, where I think if you want to go and say, I'm looking, and actually, sorry, you're there, yeah. I think just to add on, just around the learning outcomes that you were mentioning, the skills, you'll find a lot of those careers management systems now actually let you identify the skills that you're looking for from that student, and the student can match with those. So those systems are evolving every year in relation to what the student can identify in themselves from their degree, but not just their degree, also from things they've learned as part of placement or external, but also then the employer can say, you know, I was kind of being facetious earlier on when I said just a business student, but you will have a lot more that you're looking for from that as well, that you can actually put into it, and it's free. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to finish now because I'm trying to catch up on the time we lost at the beginning of the morning. So I'm going to say thank you very much to our wonderful panel. Round of applause, please.
Thank you.
And we now have time to show you that video, The Student Voice. This is about John. He's one of a set of 8 students featured as an IUA social media campaign called Work Ready Skills. And after that, we're going to have a coffee break outside, so you can make your way out there after the film, and we'll see you back at 11:45. All right?
I was challenged by myself to take myself completely out of my comfort zone and try to achieve something that I thought was impossible for myself. My name is John McLoughlin. I'm working here in supply planning in Stryker, currently studying in UL and a professional doctorate of engineering through the professional apprenticeship scheme. I'm looking at supply chain resilience with a particular focus on the post-COVID world. When you're taking on a level 10 or a master's, there are the quote-unquote hard skills that you learn, but there's also a huge amount of soft skills that come along with it as well. There's networking, there's how to be a project manager, because you've got to manage your time, you've got to manage your research resources, your data, your information, you've got to learn how to manage all of that. I think with the skills that I've acquired at UL, it's put me in a position where I believe in myself a bit more. The skills that I'm developing will put me into a position where I can move into a slightly more strategic role.